So I'm very happy to be here today. Welcome back, guys, to the Great Founders Talk at Temi. Today we have a special guest, a DJ, music producer, and founder of a clever carbon calculating accounting software company, Spherix, now Sage Earth Carbon Accounting. He is George Sandilands, Vice President of Sage Earth Carbon Accounting. And welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here, Nick.
Great. Thank you for being here, George, and agreeing to this interview. So I'm excited to get some insight into your business that you've developed and built and that you're still building on, and also your passion for humanity, a little bit how you transitioned from finance to music to carbon accounting, and how you got into being somebody that is pushing for better efforts towards the climate change crisis and your views on that, and how your business fits into that as well. So I'll kind of go through the questions sort of organically, just to kind of get an idea chronologically of your history and your business as well, and just so your mindset over the years. Does that sound cool?
Sounds great.
Yeah, awesome. So to start with, then, I'm just curious, would you be able to introduce yourself and introduce sort of how you got into thinking about humanity and like what is the biggest threat right now, and how you got into your career initially?
Sure thing. So maybe if I start at the beginning, so I've always been passionate for kind of business as a force for good in the world, and good not only meaning kind of social causes. For me, good first was music and bringing people together through like live experiences. That was what I was very passionate about. I was kind of in grew up very close to music. I was in a number of bands, played the saxophone and kind of jazz and various projects, and really for me that led to kind of DJing, collecting records, music, sort of little bits of producing music, but mostly about performing and collecting music and sharing it. That was what I was really passionate about. Actually, when I was sort of 18, 19, got a job as a DJ in Switzerland in a ski resort. I was kind of in like a party bar sort of thing, and had loads of fun, and that really over that time, over around that sort of 16, 17 through early 20s, I was kind of involved in promoting lots of music, putting on gigs, working with venues, did a lot of that in Switzerland, and I actually then met my business partner of the first kind of what I call sort of proper business in Switzerland, and we set up an events company that was kind of concentrated on putting on credible music events around the Alps and ski resorts and various sort of towns and cities in France, Switzerland, sort of a bit of Austria and Italy. And that was really my first sort of venture into, business. And I guess sort of coming forward a few years, we built up that business, ended up sort of moving back to the UK, doing a lot more stuff, eventually had a base in Bristol. We had a sort of studio office in London and a warehouse full of kind of equipment that we started with buying a couple of speakers, and then we bought some lights, and then, over time you collect more and more equipment, and all of a sudden you've got a warehouse full of, party stuff. And I guess really over the course of that journey, it became less about being at the parties and the events and a part of it, and really I was looking for kind of more of a deeper social purpose. And I think at the same time, we'd begun working with a lot of big brands, which I won't name, but whilst I think there's some really exciting parts of what's called kind of experiential marketing, bringing brands to life through events. What there is also is a huge amount of waste, resource consumption. There's a kind of throwaway culture in brand, because what's on brand 1 minute changes the next, and then all these like brand assets that have been built at great expense just go in the bin, and after you see that again and again, it was quite saddening, and I just really wanted to do something about the environmental impact of started with kind of events, and that led me down a long rabbit hole of looking at the climate crisis, looking at all the different challenges that we have, and working out what place I have in that, and that eventually led to Spherix, which was a broadly carbon but kind of resource accounting product which automates the emissions and other sort of water resource consumption calculations, helping specifically small businesses to start with measurement and then move on to action. So once I understand what my impact is, what can I do about it? And that, as you said, we were acquired last year, which was great, and we're now doing that as a part of a multinational PLC called Stage.
Dropping onto that in just a moment. So it's interesting then. So you started with the music. You were passionate about jazz in particular. Did you DJ any specific types of music, or did you?
I play all kinds of music. I still play today, but I just, it's a sort of side passion. I mean, today really I collect a lot of like world influence music. So for me that means Africa, the Caribbean. Yeah, I love being inspired by kind of ethnic sounds that are non kind of naturally ethnic to me. As well as that said, the UK incredible like bass music culture. So and
combining the two,
combining the two, bit bass, bit of a interesting global sounds. That's where
you like building, you like creating music. So I guess does the passion from creating something, like creating a song or producing a song, does that stem into creativity and passion in creating a business that
I think so. Yeah. I think there's a lot of similarities in a way. I think I was always naturally gifted with the talent of being able to like look forward in a visionary way and see what an opportunity might look like, and then also be willing to take the kind of risk to move towards that end state. And I guess it's the same in music. If you have a vision for something that you're going to build and you're determined to spend that time day after day in the studio to get there, that for me is what entrepreneurship is about. It's about recognizing there is a journey, and you're going to go on it, and you're going to make sacrifices because of that journey. If you any pursuit where you kind of dedicate yourself to, I watched a Simon Sinek thing the other day that popped up on LinkedIn, and he was saying, there's always a cost, whether that cost is the time with your family, or it's the social occasions you can make, or it's, less time with your kids. Like if you're going to take a pursuit and really be the best at it, for me it's all about balance. Really, it's making sure that you can have a healthy family and social life and health, as well as work towards those kind of be it commercial or entrepreneurial goals.
Right. So having all the pillars of your life balanced, right? Like it's fairly philosophical.
Yeah. And it's never perfect, is it? But you can you can work on it.
Spinning plates, right? Well, I admire that. And you're saying that, you went to Switzerland, you went to France, you went and did all these events in the ski resorts, which is really cool. So I guess, being a skier as well, like skiing is so awesome. But yeah, I mean, you got to take risks, right? There's, of course, risks to going on a black run or something.
Totally.
So I guess you have a lot of passion, creativity, adventurousness. So I feel like that must have fueled your energy and like your innovation when it comes to creating Spherix. So tell me a bit more about your passion with climate change, and what do you think it is the greatest threat of humanity in this century right now?
Short answer, I think it's one-off. Yes, for sure. I think for me, it's the one that I on a journey of trying to make a material global difference too.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a funny one, the big challenge with the climate crisis is that it's, even this week, we're seeing the hottest weeks that have ever been in across the world. There's kind of wildfires, there's all this stuff happening. But yet at the same time, general public feeling and opinion and the media coverage are like, whilst it is become normalized in a way that means that people might do something about it, it's still very early. And I think there's a lot of hesitance towards action, and people just seeing it as like, okay, well, this is just going to come. Or equally, kind of people being so kind of scared or concerned that they just say, oh, well, like the world's fucked, and we can't do anything anyway. It's very, I don't know, in a way, I think that's a bit of a selfish view to go, I'm not going to do anything because it's already gone too far. My view is like, it's everybody's responsibility to do something, even if that's just have conversations about what could be done, even if it might be changing your life habits 5%. Like everyone's got in an ideal world, we all eat a bit less meat, we all fly less, but I eat meat occasionally. I fly when is needed. I try not to, but these are like, I'm not kind of a martyr with this. We do live in a world where we've built kind of a global society of commerce and friendships and families based on the amazing technology of being able to fly since the 1950s, right? Like, it's incredible. The challenge is there is no current net zero emissions pathway for flying, which ultimately means that, unless there's some novel technology, and frankly, knowing the space quite well, there's not a novel technology coming quickly to help us fly in a low carbon or zero carbon way.
Yeah.
But that said, in the scheme of things, flying is 2.5% of emissions globally. So if there was ever a case for kind of, offsets or kind of being able to balance, I'd say flying is quite a good example of a part of our emissions which could be used for that. But
is there a portion of that percentage of the overall yearly emissions? Is there a portion that's bigger than flying, like cattle? You were mentioning meat, right?
So like I roughly like food is about a third to 40%.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy.
The built environment, so everything around buildings, how we live, how both homes and businesses is sort of 30-40%. There's a huge amount of emissions in the production of kind of things like steel and core materials. But I mean, across the board, every sector. So the biggest sort of like challenge, but also opportunity around net zero and this transition to effectively dismantling the way that we've lived since the Industrial Revolution and trying to do things differently is fraught with challenges. Some industries have it easier, some have it harder, but every single industry, whatever business you're in, there is a journey to go on to work out how you can continue to do what you do or change what you do in order to be a part of that net zero future. I think what's really challenging though is, there are lobbyists in every industry whose job it is to keep things the same. So status quo, really helps industries. If you're making profit from, or take oil and gas, right? They're making loads of money. They have zero interest in transitioning. They have played, they've questioned the climate science for 30 years until the point where people are locking themselves up on things, rightly so, protesting against this kind of insane continued consumption of oil and gas. And now they're sort of delay, there's delay tactics, there's this, that, the other, like, it's just they're trying their best that they can to slow down what has to come, which is stop taking fossil fuels out of the ground. It's really simple. That said, I am also kind of a realist, and I, you can't just switch off the taps tomorrow, because that would mean that, like, kind of people would suffer based on the infrastructure that we currently have and the way that the world consumes energy.
Yeah.
But we can rapidly, and hundreds of times more rapidly than we are now, transition to renewable infrastructure. That's not happening quick enough. And if governments and corporates are serious, then we should see that ramping up.
Do you see a shift in that direction with more electric cars and the use of more solar technology in places like South Korea, or perhaps, we look at Scandinavian countries, they're using a lot of wind power now. Do you see a positive shift in that direction, or is there more that we could be doing, in various countries?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of wind and solar, because they're, like, ultimately renewable. Obviously, there's still a carbon and financial and social and other environmental cost in the technology that is required to take the stuff out of the ground, but proportionally, it's so insignificant, because most solar panels can be recycled. Again, talking about the lobbying industry, there was a huge article the other day on the BBC about, solar panels are going to be the next eco disaster because we're going to have all this waste. And actually, that's a load of rubbish. There will be excellent recycling opportunities. We don't need to think about it yet, because they haven't started recycling solar panels, because we don't need to at scale for another 20 or 30 years, when those panels are going to become redundant and we need to recycle the components, ideally in a circular economy thinking way, to reuse the underlying raw materials to build new stuff. Now, there is a really big challenge, a sort of bigger meta challenge, which is, like, we can't keep growing. And I think the whole idea of, like, GDP as a measure of success is frankly, like, idiotic, because it just doesn't work. You can't keep multiplying the use of raw materials on a finite planet. Humans are the ultimate consumers of everything. We are, we have changed the climate. We are in the 6th mass extinction, which is human caused. We, are now talking about moving on to other planets because we've consumed all the stuff here. It's like there's got to be an insanity check at some point. For me, the answer is we should all work less. If you look, I'm not advocating for lockdowns at all, because there was a lot of pain and suffering caused through the COVID crisis. However, if we could sustain a world where people did not have to go to work 5 days a week, went to work 2 days a week, with those other days, we just hung out, we played sports, that would reduce emissions massively. We would not be flying around, going to business meetings, doing this, that, the other. A lot of the time, we're busying ourselves with this perceived notion that there is stuff to do. But actually, what we really need to do is do more, like, living and loving and, like, reading and, like, whatever your pursuit is that it is you enjoy, like, doing that instead of, consuming as much. But, that for me seems like a really, let's start with 4-day week. That seems like a really great way to reduce emissions, because people slow down a bit, they stop, they chill out at home, they don't have to drive to work on that day. That's, one could argue that they might do some stuff in their leisure time, but I think proportionally you would see a reduction. Like, that's. Do you
think we'll see more remote working in the future?
Yeah, 100%. I work from home a lot these days, and I love it, because it's it's a much more as with any remote, we have a remote first approach to our business unit, and we have a lot of colleagues around Europe, especially mostly in the UK, but also across Europe. And it can be challenging. It's still nice to do things in person and face to face. And obviously, if you are remote, then you have to have a bigger travel every now and again. But we encourage train travel. We actually have a really cool policy where when
public
people go
transport.
on holiday, if they travel slowly by train, they can apply for extra holiday days. So
Nice.
if you do a week holiday, but instead of flying, you take a train, which takes a day either side, we'll give you 2 extra days holiday for those travel days, and it doesn't come out of your holiday allocation. So there are mechanisms that you can do to encourage people to do things in a sort of lower carbon more, and it's nice taking the train. I love
You take this vision from Spherix and Sage Group Carbon Accounting. Now it's like it's instilled within your management style, right? Like you're encouraging your employees and your team to also adhere to these sort of practices to lower their carbon footprint. So maybe George, if you could please explain what the vision of Spherix is in the beginning and now to this day, if it's changed in any way, what it does, how you use it, and how that ties into this push for reducing individual carbon footprint.
Sure. So the original vision for Spherix is still quite similar. We wanted a way that small businesses, when I say small for us, that's kind of 100 million turnover and under, but it might be a post office on the corner, or it might be a micro business, but it's also businesses up until the point where they have not, they might have multiple sites, they might have operations in a few countries, but they're not multinational mega enterprises. Most of the software available to help businesses reduce their emissions are for massive enterprises. And there's a huge market. There's some really great software out there, the likes of kind of Watershed, Plan A, Sweep, various kind of enterprise level software. The problem is none of these tools work for small businesses, and they're very expensive. And the reason there's such a developed market for large businesses is because the large businesses have more legislation relating to them. They've got a bit more pressure from kind of government direct kind of lobbying, etc. However, 99% of businesses on the planet are defined as SMEs. More than 60% of the emissions of all businesses come from small businesses. Every small business is in every large business's value chain. They're in the supply chain. And now we're getting to a point where all these big businesses are going, oh, we actually need lots of data from small businesses. They're getting hit with all these different kind of information requests, and they don't have the resources, they don't have the time, they don't have the staff. Often the person responsible for sustainability is Sally looks at it every Tuesday afternoon for an hour. It's not like they've got a whole ESG function with multiple people kind of responsible for managing this, which larger businesses do. So for us, it was, can we make a tool to help and inform and support and educate and provide the tools for these small businesses or multi-sector to get on the journey, to start with. And for us, getting on the journey starts with measurement. It starts with looking at your emissions and where you are now. It starts with demonstrating the hotspots or the areas where you can potentially improve. And yeah, we've got a lot of businesses using our tool. What's next though really is going on a journey of, okay, we've helped you measure, but now we want to visualize that. We then want to provide you with specific decarbonization strategies that your business can use, but we're trying to automate that at scale. That's proving very difficult, but we're on that journey. But what we can do is provide subsector specific guidance and saying, okay, you're a business in this region. We recognize this, your data points have come out with this. You're potentially working with this supplier. What about, have you tried this supplier? Or We recognize that your buildings don't have solar panel fitted. Here's a solar panel fitter, and here's a finance provider who will pay for that solution. So it's creating these like micro journeys across all of the different areas of business. So looking at energy, looking at your supply chain, etc., to give them a kind of credible pathway. And then as well as that, features like kind of reporting, benchmarking, understanding where you are in your industry. So yeah, there's a range of features that are live today on our product. There's a range of features that we're working on behind the scenes. And we're also working with lots of kind of other partners. We are kind of, as well as our, what we call our self-serve product, which is kind of available today as Sage Earth. Our kind of engine, that we call it, is powering lots of other carbon accounting solutions, sort of we're the kind of behind the scenes partner that powers other solutions.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess that's a little bit about where it started, where we're going, and for us, we want to support millions of businesses. Part of the reason why we did the partnership with Sage and agreed for them to acquire the business last year is because Sage have millions of customers across the world. Right. So we've gone from being a little startup without much data to actually having more rich financial data, and a lot of the work that we would do in calculating carbon can be taken from financial data. So if you think, if you spend money on something, often that is going to have some kind of carbon impact. There's obviously a number of other areas where things wouldn't get picked up using what's called a spend-based approach. So looking at the financial data, there's also what's called activity data, which would be added to this in order to give a complete footprint. So for example, how your employees might get to work, we'd need to ask a question about that. We actually do things using kind of census data, and we've got some really good aggregates that we can use again to try and reduce the amount of data input that is needed on the part of the business, but also make sure that they've got outputs that lead to action.
Oh, interesting. So is there a requirement in, for example, the UK or other countries in Europe that, or even in America as well, that require companies to hit a certain emissions target? Is there legislation on this at the moment? Does your software help people to hit those targets, or is it more about climate eco-friendly businesses that want to also promote their image to show that they're taking part in trying to reduce net carbon emissions for like the whole globe as a whole?
So, I mean, there's a lot of kind of different, I guess, customer like user personas right now. There's definitely one user persona, which is, I want to be good. I want to demonstrate. I want to be the best, and in my industry, and I want to show the world that I'm doing the right thing. And we quite a lot of companies with that kind of approach use our tools to do that. I guess we, whilst recognize that, I'd say there's a lot of tools out there for companies like that, and also processes in a wide, beyond just like the carbon lens, which we have rightly because it's a really complicated challenge. There's also a ton of other challenges, right? There is like biodiversity, there is social challenges, there's ethics, there's modern slavery, there's all these kind of things, right, which I think is really important if a business is ethical that they should look at. We were a B Corporation, which is a framework for kind of demonstrating your social and environmental purpose to the world. It's quite a rigorous process, and we made a decision as a startup to kind of invest time into going through that process, and we were certified as a B Corp. When we were Spherix, we're now not, because we're Sage, but Sage are looking at the B Corp process, which is really interesting, and that's another area where we feel like we're making a really positive impact by enabling a really large business to credibly look at a kind of certification, which means means a lot of changes, and means they'll have to do business differently in the future, which is great. But to your point around legislation, yes, there are legislations forming across the world. There's kind of EU emissions legislation, which covers about 50,000 businesses right now, but it's growing. Australia's just put in some really quite intense legislation, which covers SMEs. The UK has a variety of different frameworks. Obviously, there's a wider kind of net zero by 2050 target, which means that all businesses on paper will have to be net zero by 2050. Whether that happens or not is TBC, because there is a need for the government to put in stronger legislative guidelines and clear frameworks especially for smaller businesses. But that is coming. And there's a project that we're involved with called Perseus, which is run by Bankers for Net Zero, who are the UK sort of UN charter for the sort of global alliance for decarbonization. That project, we believe, is going to lead to UK legislation. And yeah, once that kind of forms, then we can help organizations on that journey. But yeah, we're tracking all of the different global frameworks, and they're coming thick and fast. So I guess the message to businesses is, even though carbon accounting or even accounting for any kind of environmental impact is still not the norm today, I give quite a good example. A reference is calories, right? 20 years ago, no one had heard of what a calorie was. There was no idea on calories, but very quickly a system established itself globally to help people understand what you're putting in your body on a day-to-day basis. And now in the UK, every business above 250 employees has to put the calories of the dish on the menu, right?
And the same on packets, right?
The same on packets. So, this is coming thick and fast, and for businesses who want to get ahead of that, they should do it today. But also they should do it because it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. And so now, are you seeing most of the clients in developing countries where there's this, I guess, a stronger push towards renewable energy to reducing emissions? What do you see in terms of the future for Sage Carbon Accounting and places like China or places like Cambodia, which may at this current moment be using a lot more fossil fuels and stuff like that? Is that like potential untapped market, or are these the places for now to avoid in terms of like if they're in your supply chain? For example, if you're a business that wants to reduce your carbon emissions and your company is registered in the UK, but you have suppliers, or you have a factory in, say, Cambodia or China, should we move away from that to suppliers that are greener, or is there ways to make those economies greener in the future?
So I think firstly, it's important to know net zero means everyone is net zero, right? Okay. If any one country does not play ball,
right,
everything falls down. Yeah. So, and this is quite the interesting political challenge that's going on. You've got OPEC nations just kind of continuing to pump out oil. You've got Vladimir Putin doing whatever he does, who knows what's next, but certainly continuing to pump oil for as long as he probably can. And that's really challenging, right? Because if these guys do not come on board the journey, we're still going to see temperatures rise. We're still going to see massive challenges in terms of migration and extreme weather events, which are going to affect everyone. So I think short answer to is there certain suppliers you can work with who are more ethical and environmentally conscious? Absolutely. And I think they're all over the world. I don't think there's suppliers. I don't think necessarily it's about this particular region or sector is not doing a good thing. It's more, if you've got a supplier and you work with them closely and you're material enough for them to answer your questions, because sometimes, if you're buying some stuff off an Amazon supplier and you start sending them messages saying, what's your ethical policy? They're probably just not going to get back to you, right? But if you've got suppliers that, you've got a good relationship with, right, start asking them questions, understand what their practices are. Do they have a modern slavery statement? Do they kind of, measure their emissions? Do they have any kind of environmental targets? What is their policy on X? You're totally within your rights to ask these things. And if they don't have anything, maybe point them towards resources where they can go on that journey. I think
supplier change as well.
It's a joint challenge we've got, and everyone in any business on any part of the supply chain can make a difference based on their personal actions. I'm a real strong kind of advocate of that. I think it's
Right.
often easy to point the finger elsewhere and say, God, it's so bad over there. These guys are doing so much bad stuff. It's like, well, yeah, start at home. What are you doing? How
Right.
can you? That's all.
Okay, that's interesting. So start with yourself and then your business, and then try to help your suppliers if you can. If not, move to a different supplier. Yeah. Okay, so that's a good message.
I did have one final point actually on China. So
Okay.
China, whilst they have a lot to answer for in terms of ethics and human rights and various other things, they are leading the way by a mile
Oh yeah.
in terms of decarbonization.
Oh, interesting. That is very interesting. Can you expand on that a little bit?
I don't want to get this statistic wrong. I
That's-
might. So,
Yeah.
audience, please take this with a pinch of salt. But I think they built more wind and solar last year than all of the wind and solar in the United States.
In just one.
Kind of that in 1 year, right? And I might have that wrong, but there is some unreal statistics. That's just one of many, right? They are, if this is what China did last year, this is what the rest of the world did. It's incomparable.
To be fair, like China's one of those countries that it grew very rapidly economically, right? And then it did a lot of production. There's a lot of labor. There's a lot of factories. There's a lot of resources over there. But at first, of course, it's very polluting. South Korea gets polluted once a year supposedly because of the smog coming from China. But now, China is so rich and powerful and has still been growing pretty well that they could probably pump that money back into then cleaning up their cities, because I'm sure now their wealthier citizens want clean air, and they're probably starting to care about the planet too more now that they have the resources.
There is a lot of things that are bad about having a dictatorship.
Sure.
But the one thing that is very good is that you can have really clear, direct leadership on things like climate.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a number of experts, most recently Mike Berners-Lee, who is one of the kind of leading carbon footprinting and sort of climate experts, was saying, we kind of need that kind of level of strict dictatorship style approach towards the climate, because the free market economics will not get us to net zero. I think I have grave concerns that because as humans we're self-interested, and because each industry is effectively interested in continuing to do what they do, and a lot of industries need kind of fundamentally dismantling and changing what they do. You look at what happens in France, right? When they proposed to put the petrol prices up slightly, you had riots all over the country because people want to pay more for petrol. Like, that's a microcosm compared to some of the changes that are going to be expected for net zero. I think, whilst we're going to have, it's not all going to be fun, right?
Right.
I understand. And I'm not sure what that looks like yet, but I would certainly advocate for stronger global agreement and legislation towards how we get there, whilst also recognizing that we need a just transition that balances the needs of people, society, and and make sure that no one kind of gets left behind. That's going to be really difficult.
So you think that's what helped China to grow then, was the strong laws that they started to create around?
They can just do stuff.
Yeah.
with a single mindset, right? And that's not always the right mindset, but it's they've got cities waiting there that will hold 10 million that they're just waiting. They haven't even deployed people into yet. That they just know
There's
that they
the
can
infamous
create.
ghost.
They're so far ahead in lots of ways. But as I said, there's a negative side of that. There's mass genocide. There is horrific kind of things which have been purported that they do, and I think there's probably a lot of evidence that is correct. There's certainly a lot of secrecy. There's certainly a lot of cover-ups. So they're far from a perfect example, but with that carbon climate lens, they're demonstrating that things can be done at scale quickly.
Okay, so will you hope that there's increased legislation in the future in, say, the UK that, of course, doesn't bring about that kind of change in government, but at least it brings about like stricter controls on what you can and can't do?
I think so, and there is a lot of things moving, right? There's we work closely with a number of UK banks, and they are changing the interest rates based on your climate performance. So if you can access capital cheaper than your next business because you measure your carbon footprint, you've got an ethical policy, very quickly there is a strong commercial driver for you to go and do that thing. So for us, that's what we have a lot of encouragement in the way that the market should work, which is, the finance institutions, the governments create commercial financial incentives for people to move in a particular direction, and then the market moves. That is what we hope should happen. It's just not happening quick enough.
And you mentioned about free market capitalism won't get us there. Is there a point that where with say Tesla or other companies that are developing more of these technologies that are going to hopefully reduce emissions overall, or do you see these industries as genuinely reducing emissions, like a Tesla car?
Look, electric vehicles are better than petrol vehicles, but not having a vehicle is way better than that. Or
fundamental shifts.
Better public transport, or creating community. They call it, in architecture, there's what they call 15-minute communities. The idea that within 15 minutes you can get to the shop, you can get to the school, you actually don't have to go that far. And yes, you might want to go on holiday or you travel certain long distance, but at the minute you get people, and I've done this historically, I used to drive an hour and a half each way for a job when I was 17, just trying to bring some money in while I was also, running around trying to put pies on. And, that's kind of insane. I'm filling up with fuel, I'm driving a vehicle on my own across the country just to get to a job that I work to then drive back home. And people do that every day. We need to stop some of this insanity going on.
Commuting is insane to me. I don't miss commuting.
Exactly.
It is tough to just do it. But it's a lot of vehicles on the road, often queuing on A roads, motorways.
Totally.
Around the world, wherever you are. And commuting as well is really bad, and not just in the UK, but in many countries. There's a lot of places with bad traffic jams. And it's
exactly. So how can we build societies that, that home and work is not more intertwined from a kind of, because it's good to have some separation, but you can get to your work with ease without having to drive a big, expensive, fuel guzzling vehicle.
What is the danger if we don't hit net zero? And what is the danger if we don't do it soon? I mean, what is the real risk we face? What could start happening if we don't take action now?
I mean, more of what we're seeing, extreme weather. I think what's tragic is the countries who have the most to answer to historically, starting with the UK and then moving on to other Western states, but globally now it's the big economies. But the UK has been kind of burning fuel in a industrialized sense for the longest, and yet we are one of the countries that is going to get hit by the outcomes of the climate crisis last. The big immediate challenges lie in lots of island nations. There are island nations already in discussions about mass migration of their entire, there's islands of hundreds of thousands talking to other nations about how they can buy land for their people and move their entire people, history, heritage, culture, values, everything to somewhere new, right? That's got to be incredibly scary if you're in like a leadership position in responsible for a nation, and to know that based on the expected sea level rises, you're going to have to move everything you've ever known. This is happening today. This is not like some future state. This is going on right now. This is why there is a crisis. It's people's lives, and it's the kind of people's lives that we don't hear about, really. There is so many untold stories. Not too late.
Right.
This has got some really interesting stories. It's a collection of short stories from different people of different diaspora kind of, and it really highlights some of the challenges going on now and why it's all of our responsibility. So yeah, I'd recommend that to any viewers.
Okay. So not too late. And then also, if we don't do something about it, there is a great threat to humanity. And also, how can music help to spread awareness for climate change? And how did music inspire you, or how did you feel that the music could spread awareness? How else could you spread awareness to sort of change, because like to really fundamentally change society?
So there's an organization called Music Declares an Emergency. So that is, I guess that there's a lot of kind of organizations declaring an emergency. It's a group of kind of artists, professionals, organizations that are standing together and saying, we have a climate and ecological breakdown. We need to do something about it, and we believe in the power of music to make change. Now, what that might mean in reality is people might talk to the crowd about it, to ask people to make a change, to write songs about it. I do think art has a really important place in change. The changes that we want now, are not necessarily what we are going to do. It's the next generation and the one after that. They need to be inspired by the things that we're saying, and then change deeply, so that the whole value system is different. I'm sure you look at some things that your parents do and you think, God, I don't want to be like that. I'm going to do things my own way. I do the same. And I think that's what brings me hope, is we are going to transition, and it is going to be the children, and ultimately we're leaving them with this world. So I want to do everything I can to try and, make sure it's not.
You're doing a good job of it, like with, the invention, the creation of Spherix, and, your continuation on that with Sage. And can I ask you just a few other questions around like your leadership style, and also your passion for business, and
sure,
in general, your daily routine, and sort of like if you could just give me a few insights into that.
I'm deeply passionate about entrepreneurship. I've actually just started, or in the process of hopefully starting, with a charity called Babasa that's about bringing kind of helping young underprivileged kids into entrepreneurship. 16 to 25-year-olds, really trying to sort of work with them. So I do believe if we can help the next generation, sort of, if there's some of the things that I had to learn the hard way that someone has to learn a little bit less hard, that would make sense. Management style, I would say, I don't work for everyone. I think there's a ton of different ways you can manage people. My way is very hands off. I have a high trust organization where I think it's very important to share information openly wherever possible. I think it's important to avoid working in silos and to try and have communication. We have a like default to open policy. So if you can share it, and if there's no, obviously there's a range of reasons you might not be able to share data, be it kind of personal data or kind of ethical reasons, or if it's, to do with something that needs kind of management to look at. But really for me, it's about, let's give everyone who we're working with as much context over what they're doing, give them the tools and the ability and the resources and the education to do their best work, and then let them get on with it, and trust that they will get on with it. I don't do things like timesheets or tracking people's, what they do day to day, but people are held to more strategic, longer term objectives, and they can go about responding to that however they best please, as long as we're all on that mission. That's kind of the way I do things.
Nice. And it says you got a 4.2 Glassdoor score for Sage. I believe that's for the entire.
Yeah, Sage is great. I mean, we did this deal with Sage, partly because they are they're an ethical organization. Deeply rooted into Sage is the idea that they do the right thing. That is like a big motto, is doing the right thing. And within, even just during the process of like M&A, which is very kind of can be challenging, you're
right.
going back and forth with very commercial people over like terms, and often they would come back to like, okay, are we doing the right thing here, and that gave us a lot of, and also getting a lot of contextual examples. We knew a few people who worked in the organization, and everyone just said, look, if you're going to work for a big organization, this is a pretty good one to work for. So and since being in, I'm in the role like nearly 9 months now, and really enjoying kind of running a team and being a part of the leadership of Sage. I'm finding it's very interesting. I haven't worked for a big business before. I've only ever really run my own businesses, so it's very different, but I'm loving it. So yeah, it's my day-to-day is nice. I've got a brilliant PA called Helen who kind of helps me on with my diary and what I do, and I'd probably be a bit lost without her. But yeah, and a really great team that work with. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what do you do in your free time? This is my last question.
What do I do in my free time? That's a good question. I mean, a lot of things. I love spending time with my friends and family. I really enjoy traveling when possible, trying to do it, try to mostly do it by kind of train or low carbon way. But yeah, I love seeing the world. I love sort of swimming and exercising and playing music, enjoying music, collecting music. Music's a big kind of theme.
Yep.
And I love reading. I love educating myself about interesting things beyond just what we're working on. I do read a lot of climate literature, but I'm also quite very interested in arts and design and beginning to get into architecture. That's
nice. That's a new scope, architecture. So do you have any questions for myself? I think everything you've given me is awesome, like a lot of juicy insights into how society is aiming towards going to net zero and how much of an impact is needed. It's more than I thought, actually, and how your business fits into that. So everything's awesome and
amazing.
I don't know if you have any questions for me, but to be honest, I think we're pretty good. So I know you have to run as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, look, thanks so much. Real pleasure.